In a city where power rules and secrets can kill, Mary thought she was just another ambitious woman chasing her dreams, until a fateful encounter with a cold, enigmatic Korean mafia heir binds her life, her heart, and her unborn child to a world she never asked to enter. Will she survive the shadows, or will love be the ultimate gamble? Rain poured down the streets of Seoul, painting the city in streaks of silver under the dim neon lights. Mary clutched the small, damp towel in her hands, her pulse racing faster than the approaching taxi engines. Every step she took toward room 8303 felt heavier than the last, as though the building itself weighed down on her. She could feel the tension in her bones, a mixture of fear, anticipation, and a grim sense of duty. Her mother's life depended on her, and this was the only way. The elevator ride seemed eternal. Each floor the doors passed felt like a countdown to an unknown danger. Mary had been given clear instructions: deliver the towel, collect the money, and leave without incident. Yet, a gnawing doubt in her chest refused to let her move smoothly. Her eyes flicked nervously to the reflections in the metallic walls, half expecting to see shadows moving behind her. Finally, the doors opened to the third floor. She stepped out, and the hallway stretched before her like a corridor of uncertainty. The door numbered 8303 loomed at the far end, its dark wood polished to a cold sheen. She walked toward it, her hands trembling ever so slightly as she gripped the towel. "Mr. Jinwoo," she whispered under her breath, as if saying his name aloud could summon some invisible protection, or perhaps invite danger. The door opened suddenly, and a man stepped out, tall, imposing, with eyes sharp enough to slice through deceit. Lee Jinwoo, heir to the notorious Lee Mafia family, regarded her with a cold, calculating gaze. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice smooth but edged with an unspoken threat. I'm here to deliver a towel," Mary stammered, extending her hand. The towel was just a pretense, a symbol of her compliance. She had no illusions about her situation. "Please, this is all I can offer. Please let me go afterward. I need to help my mother." Jinwoo's gaze studied her carefully. He didn't smile, but there was a glimmer of interest behind his piercing eyes. "And what price are you willing to pay for this release?" His words were measured, but the underlying menace made Mary's stomach tighten. I have 600,000 won, she said, swallowing hard, "the only money I could gather. If that's enough, I can." Jinwoo interrupted her with a soft, dangerous laugh. "Enough? Perhaps for some, yes. But for you, we shall see." Mary handed over the money, her fingers brushing against his. She flinched at the cold contact, a reminder that this man was untouchable in every sense. He counted it meticulously, eyes never leaving hers. Finally, he nodded. "You may leave. But remember, desperation is a dangerous companion. Do not return unless it is with something worth my time." Her heart pounded as she stepped back, but she kept her composure. This was done. She had survived. Or so she thought. Mary's relief was short-lived. The very next day, she discovered that the land she had purchased, meant to secure a peaceful resting place for her mother, belonged to the Lee family. The irony was bitter. She had spent every ounce of her energy and money, only to become entangled with the same family she had barely escaped the day before. She tried to avoid contact, but fate had other plans. Her new job in Seoul's corporate district placed her under the direct supervision of none other than Lee Jinwoo. The revelation struck her like a physical blow. The man who had intimidated her, demanded her money, and left her heart racing in fear and confusion was now her boss. On her first day, Mary walked into the sleek office of Shanxia Group, the hum of activity all around her, yet her focus was singular: survive without drawing Jinwoo's ire. Her colleagues whispered about her behind her back, noting her foreign accent, her determination, her anxious glances at the man whose presence dominated the room. Jinwoo didn't acknowledge her, at least not at first, but his eyes followed her subtly, sharp and calculating. Weeks passed, each day a blend of tension and subtle intimidation. Mary could feel the unspoken game that Jinwoo played, testing her, measuring her, seeing what she was willing to endure. Then, one night, a torrential storm forced her to take a late taxi home after a long day of corporate training. Rain-slicked streets reflected neon signs and blurred the world into streaks of color. She thought she was alone in her struggle, until a sudden presence at her side made her heart jump. "Mary," a low, commanding voice said. She turned to see Jinwoo stepping out from the shadows, his coat soaked, his expression unreadable. The storm did nothing to soften his presence. It made him more formidable. "It's not safe for you to be out alone." I can manage," she said, trying to maintain her dignity. But his persistence forced her into the car he had arranged, shielding her from the rain, his hand brushing hers momentarily. Her pulse spiked, not just from the cold or the danger, but from the proximity of a man whose reputation was lethal. That night, as Jinwoo drove her home, Mary's mind raced. She had survived the first encounter, but now survival meant navigating this new world of corporate power, mafia influence, and personal vulnerability. Her mother's illness loomed in the background, a silent reminder that every choice she made carried stakes far higher than her own safety. Days later, an unexpected discovery shattered her fragile sense of control. She was pregnant. The news came with disbelief, fear, and confusion. She had taken what she believed were birth control pills, but the results contradicted her certainty. Panic seized her. What did this mean? Who could she trust in a world where even medicine might be manipulated? Jinwoo learned of her condition, not through confession, but through the unavoidable truth, and his response was unexpected. The Mafia's iron code required the protection of bloodlines and legacies, and his grandmother, the matriarch of the Lee family, demanded a solution. A contract marriage was arranged, secretive and binding, designed to protect both Mary and the unborn child. Mary's heart wrestled with conflicting emotions, resentment at being trapped, fear of the unknown, and a strange, reluctant gratitude for a man who, despite his cold exterior, had become her protector. The contract tied them together, yet left room for suspicion, secrecy, and the uncertainty of genuine trust. As she signed the documents that bound her fate to Lee Jinwoo, Mary understood one fundamental truth: survival had a price, and in this city of shadows, she had just begun to pay it. Outside, the rain continued to fall, relentless and unforgiving, washing over the streets and the secrets hidden within them. Inside, Mary steeled herself for the battles to come, knowing that her life had shifted irrevocably into a world of danger, intrigue, and the fragile possibility of love. And above it all, Jinwoo watched silently, a man of power and danger, whose interest in Mary went beyond mere obligation. Every glance, every movement, carried the weight of unspoken intentions, foreshadowing that their fates were now inseparably intertwined, whether they were ready for it or not. The rain had ceased, leaving Seoul glistening under a pale morning sun, but Mary's heart remained storm-tossed. Sleep had eluded her, replaced by anxious thoughts of what lay ahead. The contract marriage weighed heavily on her conscience. She had agreed to it out of necessity, not desire. Yet, Lee Jinwoo's presence loomed over every choice she made, like a shadow she could neither ignore nor escape. Her apartment felt smaller than usual that morning. Every object seemed to remind her of the past weeks: the towel she had delivered, the rain-slicked streets, the countless hours spent trying to navigate Jinwoo's inscrutable expectations. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, tracing the lines of tension around her eyes. Pregnancy had changed her body in subtle ways, yet the greatest change was the uncertainty gnawing at her soul. By midday, Mary had convinced herself that the corporate world was her sanctuary, a place where she could focus on skills and survival. But that illusion shattered the moment she entered the lobby of Shanshire Group. The air was thick with a tension she could almost taste, and every glance from the employees seemed sharper than usual. Whispers followed her as she ascended to the executive floor. "Mary," someone called softly, and she turned to find one of the HR assistants lingering near the elevator. "Are you all right? You look troubled." "I'm fine," Mary replied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But the truth was undeniable. She was not fine. Not only had her body changed in ways she had yet to understand, but her heart was caught in an invisible snare. Lee Jinwoo was more than a shadow in her life now. He was the architect of her immediate future. Every decision she made, every step she took, had the potential to intersect with his plans, and she had no map to navigate them. That evening, the storm clouds returned, darkening the skyline and soaking the streets anew. Mary hurried out of the office, clutching her coat tightly. She wanted only to reach her apartment safely, to be alone with her thoughts, and yet the universe seemed intent on proving her vulnerability. A figure appeared through the downpour, and her heart skipped. "Mary." The voice was low, calm, but carried the authority of someone accustomed to command. Lee Jinwoo emerged from the shadows, coat dripping, his eyes unwavering. "It's not safe for you to walk alone in weather like this." I can manage," Mary protested, though her voice betrayed a tremor of fear. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers, just enough to remind her of his dominance without a word spoken. "Come with me. I'll ensure you reach home unharmed." Reluctantly, she followed. The car he had arranged was waiting, engine humming softly, its interior dry and warm. Mary sank into the seat, trying to reclaim composure, but Jinwoo's silent scrutiny made it impossible. He did not speak, only watched the rain slide down the windows, a storm of his own making reflected in her nerves. The drive was silent except for the soft patter of rain against the roof. Mary's mind raced. What had she signed herself into? A marriage not born of love, a life entangled with a man whose power was both protective and perilous. And now, this unexpected proximity, this act of concern, only intensified the knot of confusion in her chest. Days turned into nights, each blending seamlessly as Mary attempted to navigate both the office hierarchy and the dangerous family she had unwittingly become part of. Then came the moment that shook her world. A routine medical checkup revealed what she had feared yet secretly suspected. Mary was pregnant. Her mind spun. She had taken what she thought were birth control pills. How could this be possible? The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and uncertainty. Mary stared at the small test result in her trembling hands, the inked letters confirming her fear. Her mind replayed every decision, every careless moment, and she felt a surge of panic. What would Lee Jinwoo think? What would his family demand? Was this the trap they had anticipated? Before she could make sense of her spiraling thoughts, Jinwoo appeared at her side, calm yet commanding. "Mary," he said, his tone unreadable. "We need to discuss this." I don't know what to say," Mary whispered. "I didn't." "You didn't deceive anyone," Jinwoo interrupted. "But circumstances have changed. This child, it cannot be ignored." His words carried weight. The matriarch of the Lee family, his grandmother, had already expressed concern for the continuation of their bloodline. Mary realized then that she was no longer merely a woman trying to survive in a foreign city. She was a pawn in a much larger game, her every choice scrutinized by powerful eyes. "The family will insist on a solution," Jinwoo continued, his expression softening slightly, though the edge remained. "They will arrange a contract marriage. You will be protected, the child will be safe, and the family's honor preserved." Mary's heart raced. She had agreed to a marriage out of necessity before, but now the stakes were higher. This was no longer a matter of survival alone. It was life, legacy, and a child who had no voice yet could alter every decision around her. Reluctantly, she agreed. Her signature on the contract felt like a shackle, binding her to a man she barely trusted but who had become her unlikely protector. Jinwoo, for his part, maintained a calculated distance, yet the occasional glances betrayed a subtle interest, one she could not fully decipher. The following weeks were a delicate dance. Mary tried to maintain her independence, excelling at her corporate responsibilities while learning the subtle codes of Jinwoo's world. She discovered that danger lurked in every shadow, from rival executives to hidden threats within the Mafia's inner circle. One night, she was trapped in a low-temperature laboratory, an orchestrated attempt to intimidate her or worse. The cold penetrated her bones, and fear gripped her, especially as she thought of the life growing inside her. Then, just when her strength faltered, Jinwoo appeared. His presence was a lifeline, rescuing her with a mixture of efficiency and concern that left her reeling. Questions swirled in her mind. Why did he care? Was this duty, desire, or a combination of both? The line between protector and captor blurred, and Mary realized that survival now depended as much on reading the intentions of those around her as on any physical act of escape. Even amidst danger, moments of tenderness emerged. Jinwoo's concern, though controlled, revealed glimpses of a man capable of loyalty and care. Mary, too, began to see him in a different light, not simply as a threat or obstacle, but as a complex figure navigating his own web of responsibilities and obligations. Yet, the shadow of suspicion never fully lifted. Mary could not ignore the possibility that the pregnancy itself was part of a calculated scheme. Who had switched the pills? Was it a family member seeking to bind her to the Lee lineage, or someone else within Jinwoo's sphere? Each revelation brought more questions than answers, keeping her on edge, heart racing, mind spinning. Seoul was quieter than usual that night, the kind of silence that made every distant car horn, every rustle of wind, feel amplified. Mary had stayed late at Shanxie Group, determined to prove herself capable in a world that often measured value in influence and power rather than talent. Her tasks had kept her mind busy, but exhaustion gnawed at the edges of her resolve. She checked her watch, nearly midnight. The office floors were deserted, the glow of emergency lights casting long, flickering shadows across polished floors. Mary's footsteps echoed as she made her way to the storage lab on the lower levels, a place few employees ever entered. The lab's temperature was notoriously low, kept artificially frigid to preserve sensitive materials. Tonight, though, it felt ominous. Her instincts told her something was wrong, though she couldn't articulate why. She reached the heavy metal door and hesitated, hand on the handle. A faint hum of machinery vibrated through the floor, and the sterile cold air brushed against her skin like an invisible warning. Then, the door swung open on its own. Mary's heart lurched. She stepped inside, eyes scanning the room. Filing cabinets and refrigeration units lined the walls, but there was no one in sight. Yet the feeling of being watched pressed against her chest, suffocating. A sudden click behind her made her spin. The door had shut. She tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. Panic surged. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "Hello?" she called, voice trembling. No answer. The room felt endless, cold enough to bite at her bones. And then she realized, with a shiver, that she had been deliberately trapped. Outside, the world was oblivious to her peril. The hallways of Shanxie were empty, the office lights dimmed, security cameras patrolling empty corridors. But within the frigid lab, Mary felt time stretch infinitely. She paced, attempting to stay calm, pressing her palm against the icy metal door, willing it to open. Every breath came in visible clouds, her fingers stiffening from the cold. And then she saw movement in the corner of the room. A figure stepped forward, silhouetted against the dim lights. Mary's breath caught. It was him, Lee Jinwoo. But the relief was complicated by the questions swirling in her mind. How had he found her? Had he known this trap was coming? Or had he merely been vigilant, watching over her from afar, as he often did, unseen? Mary, he said softly, yet there was an authority in his tone that left no room for argument. Stay close to me. It's not safe here. She wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the cold drained her words. Jinwoo moved toward the control panel and unlocked the door with practiced efficiency. The metal clicked, and fresh air rushed in, warm compared to the freezing room. Mary stumbled out, her knees weak, and he caught her effortlessly. She realized then that his presence was not only protection but assertion of power, a constant reminder that she was now intertwined with a man who commanded fear and respect in equal measure. Once they were safely in the car, Mary finally exhaled, though her body still shivered from the cold. Jinwoo's gaze, unwavering and intense, followed her every move. "Why did you go there?" he asked, his voice low. "That lab is dangerous. You could have lost more than time." I was told to retrieve files," Mary replied, her voice still tight with adrenaline. "I didn't expect this." Jinwoo's expression darkened. "Someone wanted to test you, or worse. And it wasn't me. But now I know where the threats are coming from. You'll be safe from them while I can ensure it." Mary's mind raced. The realization that she was being targeted made the corporate battles, the complex mafia intrigues, suddenly very real. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about her life, her child, and the fragile trust she had begun to place in Jinwoo. In the following days, tension thickened like storm clouds over the city. Mary attempted to maintain a semblance of normalcy, focusing on work and her own preparation for the challenges ahead. Yet subtle threats and curious glances reminded her that she was still a player in a dangerous game she barely understood. Each email, each assignment, carried undercurrents of danger and expectation. The maternity tests and her pregnancy became a focal point of speculation. Mary struggled to retain control over a life increasingly dominated by others' intentions. Jinwoo, for his part, oscillated between restraint and protective intervention. He was always near enough to ensure her safety, yet distant enough to maintain an air of authority and mystery. Their interactions were fraught with tension, a blend of unspoken questions, cautious glances, and moments of quiet observation. Mary found herself analyzing his every gesture, reading into every silence, trying to decipher what was duty and what was genuine care. Then came the revelation she had feared. Someone in the Lee family had orchestrated her pregnancy to bind her to the lineage. Mary overheard whispers, pieces of conversations slipped through the corridors, hints of manipulations she had not imagined. Panic surged, but with it came determination. She could not be a pawn indefinitely. She had to navigate this carefully, protect her unborn child, and uncover the truth. A confrontation was inevitable. One evening, Jinwoo approached her in a secluded office, far from the eyes of employees and family alike. His presence filled the space like a storm cloud, calm yet charged with energy. "Mary," he said quietly, "I know what you've discovered." Her eyes widened. You know." "I do," he admitted, his tone unreadable. "The pregnancy, the manipulation, it was not entirely your choice. But neither was it entirely theirs. Someone in my family acted out of fear and ambition. My grandmother is old, strong-willed, and determined to preserve the lineage." Mary swallowed, her throat dry. "So, what happens now?" "Now," Jinwoo said, taking a slow step closer, "we protect you. You and the child. I will not allow harm to come to either of you." The weight of his words struck her. In a world filled with deceit and danger, he was the only constant. Yet the question remained, could she trust him fully, or was his protection a form of subtle manipulation, another way to bind her further to the Lee family's control? The next week tested her resilience. Rival factions within the Mafia, curious colleagues at Shanxi, and lingering threats from unknown quarters kept her on edge. Yet she began to realize that Jinwoo's interventions, while calculated, also contained genuine concern. He was not merely a Mafia heir enforcing duty. He was a man who recognized the life growing within her and understood the stakes in a way no one else could. Mary's emotions were in turmoil. Fear, frustration, gratitude, and a tentative trust warred within her. Every glance from Jinwoo felt like a double-edged sword, comforting yet intimidating. Every gesture carried layers of meaning she could not always decode. And yet, through the danger and the uncertainty, she began to find a strange sense of belonging, a fragile connection in a world designed to overwhelm her. Mary stands at the balcony of her apartment, gazing at the city below. Seoul's lights shimmer like stars fallen to earth, indifferent to the dangers, secrets, and fragile alliances shaping her life. She feels the weight of her pregnancy, the complexity of her entanglement with Jinwoo, and the looming threats that promise to test her courage further. But amid the fear and uncertainty, a small, persistent hope emerges, that she can navigate this labyrinth of danger, that she can protect her unborn child, and perhaps, one day, uncover the truth behind Jinwoo's intentions, and her own heart. The night is still, but the shadows are growing. And somewhere in the city, the threads of betrayal, loyalty, and hidden agendas are being drawn tighter, preparing for the inevitable clash that will test Mary, Jinwoo, and the fragile life they now share. The night in Seoul was suffocatingly still, a deceptive calm masking the storm that had been gathering for weeks. Mary sat in her apartment, her hands resting lightly on the small swell of her abdomen, feeling the life within her. The events of the past month had left her exhausted yet alert. Every shadow, every whisper in the city streets seemed to carry a threat or promise. The delicate balance of her life between corporate demands, the Lee family's expectations, and her own survival had never felt more precarious. Her phone vibrated. It was Jinwoo. She hesitated before answering, her heart quickening as she saw his name flash across the screen. "Mary," he said, his voice steady but carrying an undertone of urgency. "We need to meet. Something has happened at Shanxi." Her stomach twisted. She had learned, the hard way, that when Jinwoo's calm carried urgency, danger was imminent. She gathered her coat and left, the rain-soaked streets reflecting the city's neon lights like fractured jewels. Each step toward the rendezvous point tightened the knot of fear in her chest. At the Shanxi building, she found Jinwoo waiting, his silhouette sharp against the glow of the emergency lights. His usual composed demeanor was tinged with a stormy intensity that made Mary's pulse race. "What happened?" she asked, her voice low. "A breach," Jinwoo replied. "The lab incident last week. It was just the beginning. Someone is targeting you, Mary, not just to intimidate, but to manipulate the Lee family's interests. I need you to trust me completely tonight." Mary swallowed hard. Trust had always been complicated with Jinwoo. His presence was protective yet intimidating, his intentions layered with both duty and personal interest. But tonight, instinct told her that any hesitation could be catastrophic. They moved together through the building's empty corridors, shadows stretching like specters. Surveillance footage revealed masked figures tampering with sensitive files, trying to compromise her work and expose vulnerabilities in the company, and possibly her own life. Mary's stomach lurched at the realization that her pregnancy, her contract marriage, and her every move had been monitored, manipulated, and now weaponized. Jinwoo's hand brushed hers briefly, grounding her in a moment of unspoken reassurance. "Stay close," he murmured. "Don't act alone." As they entered the lab, the air turned icy again, a stark reminder of her near-fatal encounter days before. The figures they had tracked were there, attempting to erase crucial data. Before Mary could react, one lunged toward her, a gloved hand grabbing her arm. Adrenaline surged through her veins. Jinwoo was a blur of precision and force. In moments, the assailants were subdued, restrained by his strategic moves. Yet even as the immediate threat dissipated, the tension remained. Mary realized this was not an isolated attack but part of a larger conspiracy, a dangerous game where the stakes included her safety, the unborn child, and the fragile stability of the Lee family's empire. Later, in the quiet aftermath, Jinwoo guided Mary to a secluded office. He removed his coat, revealing the sharp lines of his tailored suit, his composure now tempered with concern. "Mary," he said, voice low but intense, "you have to understand, everything that's happened is tied to power, influence, and legacy. But you are my responsibility now. I won't let anyone harm you or this child." Mary's eyes filled with a mix of fear, relief, and a strange warmth. She had feared him, trusted him only partially, and yet here he was, protective, commanding, and unwavering. Her fingers brushed her abdomen instinctively, feeling the life she carried, the symbol of her resilience in a world designed to control her. I don't know what to say," she admitted, voice trembling. "I feel trapped between fear and gratitude." Jinwoo's gaze softened, a rare moment of vulnerability breaking through his usual icy exterior. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured. "Actions matter more than words. Survive tonight, and we plan our next move. Together." The following days were a whirlwind of strategy and revelation. Surveillance footage, cross-checked against lab reports, exposed the identity of those behind the attacks. A faction within Shanxia Group, driven by jealousy and ambition, had orchestrated the events to discredit Mary, leveraging her pregnancy and her contract marriage as tools of manipulation. The confrontation was inevitable. Mary, with Jinwoo's guidance, faced them. Her voice, though calm, carried the strength of someone who had survived betrayal, manipulation, and fear. "Your actions won't succeed," she said. "I will protect myself, my child, and my integrity, and you will answer for every step you've taken." The culprits, confronted with the evidence and the unyielding authority of Jinwoo, had no choice but to submit. Mary felt a surge of empowerment. She realized that survival was not passive. It required courage, strategic thinking, and sometimes the willingness to rely on unexpected allies. Yet, even as danger subsided, the emotional stakes between Mary and Jinwoo reached a new height. Moments of vulnerability, shared concern, and silent understanding began to knit an unspoken bond. Jinwoo's protective actions, once intimidating, now felt like a subtle declaration, an acknowledgement that Mary was no longer just a responsibility or a pawn. She was someone he could not ignore, someone who had earned his respect and attention. One evening, as the city slept beneath a soft drizzle, Mary and Jinwoo stood on the balcony of his penthouse. The skyline stretched endlessly before them, illuminated by distant neon and streetlights. The air was crisp, carrying both the weight of recent events and the promise of the unknown. "You've changed," Jinwoo said quietly. "Stronger than I anticipated, more resilient than I expected. You've faced threats most people couldn't even imagine, yet here you are." Mary looked at him, searching for the edge of his sincerity. "And you?" she asked softly. "You're not just a protector, you're different with me." Jinwoo's expression softened further, vulnerability barely hidden beneath his composed exterior. "Perhaps," he admitted, "but even I cannot ignore what's real. I will protect you, not just as a duty, but because I want to. That is as much truth as I can offer right now." Her heart trembled at the confession, a strange mixture of fear and hope. In a world of danger and uncertainty, moments like this were fragile, fleeting, yet precious. Mary realized that while the Mafia's shadow would always linger, and corporate intrigue would never fully vanish, she had found an unexpected anchor in Jinwoo. The chapter closed with Mary returning home, weary but determined. She knew that challenges remained: rival factions, family expectations, and the ever-present uncertainty of her child's future. Yet she also recognized her own growth, her ability to navigate the storm with courage and intellect. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces of their shared world, Jinwoo watched over her, the line between protector and confidant blurring. The contract marriage, the conspiracy, the near-fatal encounters, they had all forged a bond that neither time nor danger could easily sever. The city slept, indifferent to the private battles waged above its streets. But Mary, with her heart pounding and her resolve steady, understood one thing clearly: she was no longer just a survivor. She was a force, unseen, resilient, and ready to face whatever fate had yet to unleash. Tonight, Seoul's light shone like distant stars, but within the walls of their world, Mary and Jinwoo found a fragile certainty. Amidst chaos, danger, and betrayal, they had each other, and that was a beginning. The first light of dawn filtered gently through the curtains, painting Mary's apartment in soft hues of gold and rose. The city of Seoul stretched beyond the window, quiet now after nights filled with uncertainty, danger, and whispered threats. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Mary allowed herself to breathe deeply, free of the immediate weight of fear. Her hand rested lightly on her growing belly, the child she carried no longer a secret, but a promise of hope in a world that had tested her resolve at every turn. Every heartbeat reminded her of the journey she had endured, from the manipulations and machinations of the Lee family, the dangerous shadows of the corporate and mafia worlds, to the personal battles of trust, courage, and survival. She had survived, but more than that, she had grown. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She smiled softly, knowing who it would be. Jinwoo stepped inside, calm and composed as always, but with a rare softness in his gaze that only she had seen in private moments. In his hands was a small bouquet of flowers, a gesture of tenderness that contrasted with the sharp, commanding persona the world recognized. "Good morning," he said quietly, placing the flowers on the table. His eyes lingered on her belly, then met hers. "How are we today?" Mary laughed lightly, a sound that felt like sunlight after a long storm. "Strong, determined, and still figuring out how to trust you completely." Jinwoo stepped closer, his hand brushing hers instinctively. "You don't have to rush. Trust is built through actions, not words. And I promise, I will continue to act." There was a pause, filled with unspoken understanding. The city below seemed distant, its dangers momentarily muted by the fragile peace that filled the room. For the first time, Mary felt that she and Jinwoo could envision a future not dictated by threats, manipulation, or the shadows of the mafia, but by choice, connection, and perhaps even love. Later that morning, they walked together along the quiet streets of Seoul. The drizzle from previous days had left the pavements slick, reflecting the morning sun like liquid gold. Mary's hand found Jinwoo's, a simple touch that carried reassurance, warmth, and an unspoken promise. "You've changed my world," Mary whispered, her voice soft but steady. "Not by force, but by being here, protecting me, challenging me, and trusting me." Jinwoo's lips curved in a rare smile. "And you've changed mine. You've taught me that strength isn't only about power or control. It's about resilience, courage, and the heart we give to those who matter." They paused at the park, watching children play in the distance. Mary's thoughts drifted to her own child, the life growing inside her. For so long, she had felt trapped by circumstances, manipulated by others' agendas, and bound by a marriage of necessity. But now, hope filled her chest. The baby would grow in a world protected not just by power, but by love, imperfect, cautious, but real. As they stood in the soft light of morning, Mary realized that the trials of the past had forged something new, a connection neither could ignore. The contract marriage that had begun as a necessity had transformed into a partnership rooted in trust, understanding, and unspoken care. Jinwoo was no longer just a protector. He was a partner, an anchor in a world that had so often sought to sweep her away. Whatever comes next, Jinwoo said quietly, we face it together. No schemes, no shadows. Just us. Mary nodded, her eyes reflecting gratitude and newfound confidence. Together, she agreed, her voice steady. And in that moment, the city's hum felt less like a backdrop of danger and more like a living witness to their journey, a story of resilience, courage, and the fragile, enduring power of trust. The rain began again, light and cleansing, washing the streets and rooftops. Mary and Jinwoo walked hand in hand, a quiet determination in each step. They could not erase the past, nor the shadows that still lingered, but they could shape their future. And for Mary, that future was no longer defined by fear or manipulation, but by the strength she had discovered within herself, and the man who had become more than a shadow in her life. As they disappeared down the glistening streets, the city seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had gripped it for so long. A new chapter awaited, full of possibility, courage, and the quiet, steady heartbeat of a family yet to be born. The storm had passed, and for the first time, Mary knew that she and Jinwoo would face whatever came next, not as pawn and protector, but as partners bound by choice, resilience, and the promise of a life they would build together.